By the end of the week, Forge World Istobon 3 had begun their counterattack, crushing the remaining warbands and other traitors that were now leaderless and slightly lacking armor units. That's a big problem when a Legio Titanica knocks politely at your door, then kicks it open with a 50-meter-wide adamantium foot. In orbit, things were going rather well, as without battleships the traitors couldn't stop the mighty fleet of the cult Mechonicus, nor defend against constant harassment from my own ships, as I lead the fleet in and out and picked off a dozen more enemies, then fell back to reload. The Canticle's kill count rapidly climbed and passed 100, then 200 kills. Then again, it took only a full salvo from my battleship-grade lance batteries to explode a destroyer, and a salvo of guided torpedoes to sink a cruiser. Demons weren't as much a problem in space, because our guns were much heavier too. What would need a dozen tanks to kill on the ground took a single lance for my ship, and a few more from the smaller escorts. Then 100 cruisers gathered in a kill squad to hunt me and the Canticle, possibly exasperated and aggravated by my actions, and so I did what any rogue trader would do. I turned my pretty battle cruiser around and ran, and used my torpedo destroyers to come about and surprise the chasing idiots from behind, with a 50-meter-long suppository that delivered plasma warheads instead of medicine. The Litany scored a dozen kills and the destroyers as many, before the Chaos Admiral gave up and decided to return to his fleet. Only by then, the Mechonicus fleet has taken advantage and attacked, and shattered the Chaos battle line. I ordered my corvettes to group in wings and hunt down the scattering traitors, and we bagged some 20 cruisers more, before they reached warp limit and fled, tails between their legs. While the fighting on the ground continued, I landed to meet the Fabricator General. Beside him it was a huge machine, that I soon learned was called War Leader Banyus of Clan Cargill, the leading strategist of the Iron Hands Astartes. "Hello, and good to see you. I need 300 corvettes to replace my losses, Fabricator," I demanded in a less modest tone. "I mean, fuck that. Lord Pef had golden veins in my left hand now." "You only lost 261 of those corvettes, rogue trader," the dreadnought interjected with no reason. I drew off my armored glove, and held my left hand out. "Talk to the hand, Astartes," I quipped, since the dreadnought was a Terminator in every respect. The Fabricator laughed as if I said a wonderful joke. "That's the famous hand you got from the angel?" he asked to make sure. "Yeah, I'd need you to analyze what the sword guy did. He used some blood angel blood for this construct, and you have my original genes on record," I answered a bit more relaxed. Istobon were the good guys, and even gave me 1,000 years of youth for free. "You seem upset with me for some reason, Lord Lancefire. Have we not fought together?" the dreadnought boomed in a tenor voice. "I don't know you, Astartes Banyus. But my own mother just died, sacrificing herself to kill an Astartes Primarch. Then another Astartes boarded my ship and shattered my wrist. Among those who just attacked Istobon, how many Astartes were there?" I shouted towards the infirm space marine walking around in his coffin. Something whirred and sputtered inside the coffin, then the veteran turned away in silence. "Don't blame the venerable dreadnought for the acts of others. I'm certain many rogue traders do despicable things someplace, right?" the Fabricator intervened in a peaceful voice. "There are 20,000 crippled guardsmen from my regiments, just on board the Canticle. I don't see any Iron Hands offering them genocides and bionic limbs. They take healthy men and cripple them instead. Fresh young boys taken from the plow or factory, and given power armor and guns. No wonder half the Astartes go mad with power and start pillaging." I muttered with distaste and walked away. In a minute, the Fabricator had me sit comfortably in a metal chair with too many needles and probes whirling around. "This won't hurt too bad. Let's extract some blood and skin samples, then I will sequence them, right away," the Magus explained, trying and failing to sound like a professional medic. Still, he tried, which wasn't so bad. An hour later, we had some results, which were mildly promising. Not quite a genocide implant, but similar enough that I should see improvements in my every stats, mind, body and soul. For now, only your left hand was affected, but this will spread to your whole person in a few years. No Astartes organs, unless some chapter agrees to initiate you among their brothers. But this proves your conjecture was correct. blanks, or at least blanks from your bloodline, can become Astartes and be immune to warp corruption. The fabricator mused, and took out a palm-sized emblem shaped like a coffin. Is that a blank machine spirit? I asked immediately. Indeed it is. This is a storm shield applique I intend to give to war leader Banyus, for his aid in defense of Istobon. We have already tested them on our holy titans and battle automata, and they worked with statistical certainty. Instances of warp corruption have decreased by 20% with this simple pattern applied to the chassis, and once we perfect the machine canticles and the consecration engrams, that percent will go up, he declared proudly. What about cogitators? I asked with a frown. That will take more time. Or less time, if you agree to stay 1 year and allow us cloning of your enhanced tissues. The fabricator pleaded with a hopeful voice. It only took a second to think it over. I could spare 1 year. My regiments will need time to heal or get bionic replacements as well. Ships will need repair, and the armor regiments will have to be rebuilt to strength. I will do it. If you fix my ships and people, my life isn't worth all of theirs. I spoke in a gentler voice. The Magus patted my head with his cold tentacle. Of course, Lord Pef. We always pay our debts. Then, I could ask for the volcano_cannon pattern. My corvettes need some upgrades, I demanded after a minute. The fabricator sighed in defeat. He had to pay his debt, after all. As I was leaving the fabricator, the dreadnought Astartes waited for me, with a few more iron hands, all sporting nearly full mechanical replacements. Ludvius was there, and so was Mansirius Thracius, the last surviving scythe from my honor guard. Captain, these iron hands want to offer their support, Thracius announced in a flat voice, like it wasn't his business. Well then, it seemed my sneaky plan worked. Now let's see what they actually offer. Very well. We'll speak on the canticle. I'm certain my tech priests can offer them some machine oil to drink. I allowed politely and kept walking without a single glance towards the cyborgs. Ludvius snorted amused and walked faster, to arrive first at the landing pad and check for danger. Paranoid perhaps, but then again. Chaos troops were still on Istobon, and even a few ships somewhere beyond the gas giants. My Stormbird transport engaged the Geller field first, before taking off for the canticle. The Iron Hands muttered at one another while examining my assault lander with greedy eyes. Yes, I bet you'd want this nice craft, and maybe a dozen fell blades too, as a welcome gift. But I wasn't feeling generous today. Ludvius and Thracius accepted. I kinda loathed Astartes right now. Bunch of overgrown bullies, who couldn't even keep an oath. I made a note to locate the Sworn of Guilliman, another traitor chapter who pillaged the eastern fringe, and exterminate them. And soon enough, every other Xeno or traitor infesting my tiny corner of the galaxy. Can we see those wounded soldiers, Captain Lancefire? Another Iron Captain asked politely once the transport landed on my ship. Astartes Thracius will escort you. And if you draw weapons on my ship, you better be faster than the last Astartes who tried. I replied with a dismissive voice and left without turning, Ludvius stomping on the deck beside me, possibly a little upset. A minute later I entered the elevator and stared him in the eye. You disagree, Blood Angel? That was Lord Clan Commander Arvan Rout, Iron Captain of Clan Rorvan. There is no need to be hostile with him, or any Iron Hand brother. He spoke in a warning voice. I nodded and smiled wryly. And yet, here they are, begging me to let them recruit my wounded guardsmen. I answered a bit jovially and let out a small snort. In the long run, a mechanical Astartes dying for the Emperor is better than a crippled soldier living on a meager pension. Ludvius blinked while he thought it over. I see, it was all a trick. Shame them into accepting the crippled soldiers as their aspirants. Indeed, that was the plan and worked fabulously. And what would the angel say, after he healed those thousands of burnt guardsmen with your blood, Ludvius? I had merely a broken wrist. Perhaps it was as thanks for my mother. The miracle was for them, not a tiny gift that a tech priest could repair in 10 minutes. How did you know it would work? Was that our Primarch, returned from the dead? The Astartes asked me with fervor. You talked to him, not me. I collect only rumors and stories from around the galaxy, repair STC patterns and devise plans and strategies. You created the miracle, Astartes. Your blood is the reason. I answered cryptically. Truth is I didn't know. Some say the angel is the good part of Sanguinius, a fragment of his soul looking after his children. Other sources say it is a blood angel guardian of the Red Grail, that fell into a warp rift. But I suspect the Sanguiner is just like all the other saints or the Legion of the Damned. The Emperor is part of the warp now, and his dreams are made flesh. If you'll please reach him, then he might send help, just like the Chaos Gods send champions of their own. Sing or pray louder, and miracles will follow you around, like they do with the Sisters of Battle or some Astartes. Rose met me in my apartment, already dressed in her sanctified armor. Back to your job, my dear Rose? I asked in a light voice. Yes. I'll have to recruit a new retinue. So what did you find? She asks as her Death Watch Marine takes position beside Ludvius. What the angel did won't stop with my hand. I'll slowly transform into a bulky guy with too much strength. The extra brains will be helpful though. I explained and kissed her cheek. She smirked and measured me up and down. A neophyte body? I bet you could last in bed for weeks, Rose murmured and blushed a little as her eyes glazed in anticipation. Hush woman. Go back to death and duty, I exclaimed in fake outrage and sat down in my creation chair, holoscreens and incipient 3D conversion engines powering up. The Canticle's machine spirit seemed quite eager to help me experiment with the STC templates. Ludvius stood behind me, learning the craft from me and sometimes providing important clues why some weapon or emplacement was built in illogical ways. I opened the Weasel's STC template and compared it with the original Centaur troop transport of the Astra Militarum. A dozer blade wouldn't be of use for a patrol vehicle, except to clear obstacles, like fallen trees and dead bodies. But a small, lighter one in a fixed position could serve as both a ram and protection against explosions and mines. 2 extra plates of plasteel on the sides would protect the tracks and also take the brunt of an explosion. Then I changed the autocannon for a las cannon remote turret and a missile launcher. The saved weight from the lack of a big man turret would allow more armor and more fuel. The las cannon wouldn't be limited by ammunition, and it hit 10 times harder than the autocannon, if also at a slower rate of fire. However, the main problem of the land armies was not the fire volume. Millions or billions of lasguns provided sufficient volume, but not enough strike power, to pierce armor or chitin plates. But now, this tiny and cheap machine would be almost equivalent to a power armor suit in durability and firepower and just as fast in straight lines. To compensate for the reduced suppression fire, I added an addendum. The laser weasel pattern of the Centaur transport is designed to operate in groups of 5 to 10, covering each other as they advance or retreat. Now, because the STC template said so, the army commanders will have to deploy larger groups, which squads would obviously be much stronger than a single such unit alone on some road. I needed about 70,000 such machines for my PDF regiments, to provide my 70 feral worlds with a degree of motorization and anti-armor ability, and Forge World Istobon should be nice enough to build them. In a year they should be ready. Another variant was the old Weasel but with a long wagon on wheels tracked behind it. This would help logistics immensely, able to ferry food, water, ammo and even soldiers. Suppressive fire from the autocannon would help deter looters, pirates or criminals from attacking the convoy. I wanted 70,000 them as well, but even a tenth of that will suffice right now. Then I drank a big cup of CF, and loaded the new volcano cannon, which is simply a big laser lance weapon, normally mounted on Titans or Baneblades. After adjusting it a little, I fit the schematic over the volcano lance template and superimposed them in the holoscreen. Sadly I had no more helpful tech priest to help, but Ludvius had the brains and the implant. What do you see, my friend? Same weapon in 2 sizes. So why isn't the schematic simply a larger version? I asked as I began marking the differences with red outlines. I'd say, because same weapon would break under its weight if you just make it bigger. Just like with spaceships, right? The Blood Angel wondered, seeming unsure. He was correct, but the Mechanicus could have simply used more durable alloys. But no, what the fabricator gave me was the Mark II Terracharge volcano cannon, which was too strong even for Titans. I did say I intended to mount them on corvettes. I powered up my 7th implant and started to work, examining each component for flaws or easier construction. Then all of a sudden my alert went off, the maximum 8 hours of work completed for today. I saved the progress and went to my jacuzzi to relax, also calling Henna to aid me with that. Being a big shot captain had perks too, not just getting shot at by big chaos raiders. Some time later, my wife rested in my lap, and examined my strange hand. You were blessed by an angel of the Emperor, husband. I fear this means more trouble will come for you. Of course it will, my love. Hopefully it will be more Xenos or traitors that I can best with weapons. The corrupted rulers in the Imperium worry me much more. I explained in a soft voice and played with her generous body, the one who gave me Finona, our blank ship captain. A soft growl emerged from Ludvius, but I ignored him. Those Adeptus Auroritas keep asking questions about you. Your crew, your family, even the tech priests. Henna muttered with an accusing glance at my bodyguard. I had to get rid of them. Forge Riser contacted this Hospitalia chapter to aid with injuries and morale, but they were overstepping. I tapped my ear. Victor, take Astartes Thracius and a company of Void Marines, and expel those sisters down to Estobon. If they refuse, shoot first. I ordered and laid back to rest. This isn't wise, Captain, Ludvius said in a stern tone. My ship, my rules. If they don't like it, I expect an angel will arrive to slap my hand. I argued in a dismissive voice. I was indeed worried they might uncover something, and then report me to some fat slimy bishop who will simply order them to murder me. It might happen anyway. Then I just waited for my son to report repelling the zealot boarders. For once, the sisters didn't choose to martyr themselves like they usually do, and departed the canticle for the vanquished while singing loudly. I bet they weren't all that happy inside though. A week later, I met one of them inside the medical research facility, waiting for me in a graceful poise. Captain Lancefire, please, hear me out, she asked in a rather inciting voice. Ludvius, if she sings at me, crush her windpipe, I said in a careless tone, while the Astartes stepped to the side, ready to crush the pipes. No singing, Lord Pef. I reflected upon my actions, and indeed we may have been imposing on your crew and family. But we need to know, she demanded in a fervent voice. I stepped closer to her and stared into her pure blue eyes. The whole church is corrupt, the bones, sister. You wear a weapon, when the decree explicitly said the church may not have soldiers. The Imperium has more than enough armed orders, and the church holds the highest authority anyway. You are the symptom of that disease, pretty sister. Join the Imperial Guard or the Navy if you want to serve, not some fat, stinky. I growled in distaste and walked around her. I didn't walk fast enough. All right. I will leave the Hospitaliers. Let me join your crew, she yelled at me back. Damn it. She really was obsessed. But then again, I turned around and hugged her to my side. Really great body on her, as expected from a warrior order. Excellent news, my dear. I could use a medic for my crew. The job is not very safe though. Demons and Xenos abound in the eastern fringe, I whispered as if it was a big secret. The Emperor protects. I've seen it with my own eyes. Your wish is my command, Captain Pef, she murmured a bit demurely and tone raising into a squeak. Right, close contact with the man wasn't allowed. For sisters, report to the landing pad, medic. And see if there are others who wish to explore the galaxy in style. I told her with barely restrained mirth. My Rose will have a fit at my new retinue. Then I went to undergo a long batch of tests and sample takings, with a dozen biologists magi spinning blood vials and slicing away at my holy hand. It was quite boring, but I had my savant implants to continue working on the Volcano STC at a slower pace. A month later, I had an early model for a Corvette-worthy Lance, with its autonomous atomantic reactor dedicated for it, as to not strain the engines or the void shield during combat. Pretty much like an infantry lasgun worked, with the power pack battery. Then I doubled, tripled and quadrupled the barrels for better range and rate of fire, till I knew I had something amazing, if quite expensive. I decided to mount a twin-linked plasma bombardment cannon and 2 quad lance batteries on the newest Corvette model. Plasma worked better to break void shields, but the technology was clunky and risky and prone to explosions. That turret was fixed on the outside of the hull, and due to the costly lessons learned here in the Battle of Estobon, I also decided to armor the turrets further, with a 10 cm thick adamantium cover. Already tech priests and servitors were scavenging the useful remains from the lost Navy ships, and even recovered enough iridium plates from my corvettes to start building new ones right away. On the third month, Estobon's surface was declared free of invaders, the last chaos pockets of resistance burned alive or sent into the warp. In space this took much longer, and even after 11 months there were still sightings of chaos raiders prowling the edges of the system. But they lost hugely in this adventure. At least 1,000 ships and 15 heavy ones, battleships and battlecruisers. Even if they had dark mechanicum forges in the Eye of Terror, ships took a long time to build. My fleet didn't depart as one from Estobon, because there was no reason to and good reasons against it. The Litanian 4 destroyers were almost in perfect repair, and the same for the Antax-made corvettes, so Finona took that fleet and left for our home in the Fringe as soon as possible, with extra servitors and tech priests supplied by Estobon. Another squad of 5 destroyers and 200 more corvettes departed once the ground battle ended, filled with weaponry and tanks and a few regiments in better shape. And once the promised year of medical torture had finished, the Canticle and 200 more corvettes were repaired, supplied and ready to go. The last batch of destroyers and damaged corvettes stayed behind with my brother Virion in command, waiting for longer and difficult repairs, as well as a promised universe_class_mass_conveyor filled with goodies for my empire in the east. These ships will be also upgraded to the latest Estobon 3 pattern, the one with volcano cannons. Yes, the destroyers will receive 2 of those lance batteries as well, with the extra reactors. The design of the classic Cobra destroyers only allowed a single lance battery at the prow, beside the torpedoes. Not anymore. The discovery of a relic King Cobra pattern destroyer surprised absolutely nobody, and I even managed to fix some design flaws in the ship itself, installing a dozen macro cannons on the sides and 2 triple-barrel batteries per side, the new gravity-fed model, then extra armor skirts to the sides for plasma and acid deflection, a few more bulkheads around the reactor and the bridge, slightly better sensors and auguries, and a secondary Geller field with the Estobon trademark blank machine spirit power shield protecting it from warp interference by 21%. Add to this the improved anti-fighter defenses with multi-lasers and hunter-killer missiles, and a destroyer could now actually do its job as escort vessel. Nothing fundamentally different, but once this pattern spread into the Imperium, the Navy destroyers will receive a substantial increase in firepower and some extra resilience. The Iron Hands selected a few thousands crippled for their aspirant testing, volunteers only. Curiously, not all those selected by the Iron Hands agreed to become mechanical Astartes. Jiren has informed that another pair of transport ships will head towards Riza and Triplex Fal, the final loading procedure and incense blessing to praise the Omnissiah taking place right now. So, I told him about my own blessing and what Estobon have discovered. He wasn't all that happy at the news, expecting a whole lot of trouble from the Emperor's worshippers. My mentor was right, much like always. I now had 5 former sisters serving on board the Canticle as medics, physicians and spiritual healers for the crew, and Helena, the cute woman with silver hair and blue eyes, served in a more private role. She had no experience with men, but I allowed her some leeway, and did the hard part myself. Helena didn't like Ludvius standing guard, nor my wives enjoying the show like they sometimes did. I'd say it was worth it, for a woman in love is a blessing in bed. "Are you certain you're not corrupting me, Captain?" Helena wondered as she rested on my chest and caressed my sacred left hand. "Your children could become medics, my dear. And if you teach them, they'll even be good medics, like you are. Plus, I'm a blank so the warp cannot touch me. You heard what my mother did, right?" I replied softly and groped her artful body with my special hand. Helena shivered and melted into my embrace. "What about my sisters? Will you demand they join your little harem as well?" the woman asked in a tiny fit of envy. "Demand? I have plenty women that beg me for a child. Plus Decima handles the harem thing. You spoke with her, and she interviewed you for this duty. You demanded to stay at my side, even in bed." I replied in a soft snort. The Canticle lurched and emerged from the warp at Antax. It was time to start trading again. The old Lament cruiser that I gave the Mechanicus was nearly ready, armor and engines in place. A few exotic turrets decorated its hull, possibly Archaeotech excavated at Anvilus 9. I wanted some of those myself, and today it was the day everything paid off. A company of 100 young men, all blanks from my lineage, were already undergoing testing and seed dissemination on nearly anima levels. Each of them had 300 concubines prepared and housed by Forge Entax in their biological research complex, some of them getting impregnated naturally while other via surgery. I expected Istobon used my genetic samples for the same purpose, trying to obtain as many blanks as possible for the next growth cycles. After a few years of constant martial and marital training, my descendants will be received by the Blood Angels for genocide implants. By then, the next batch of 100 men will arrive at Antax from Aliva to begin the cycle again. I was promised the test companies will not be decimated in traditional Astartes training. Sure, they would get tougher and faster like that, but every Astartes was so anyway. What the Blood Angels needed were recruits that wouldn't mutate or go mad from the cursed genocide. Their chapter could and did massacre, 1,000,000 hive criminals to obtain 1,000 aspirants, but my sons were not chattel. My grandkids and nephews were not target practice for bored vampires. I even told them so. I don't care about shitty traditions and whatever codex. They obviously suck, simply by counting how many Blood Angels go mad and berserk. You want beasts, you can have them. Become tyrannids for all I care. Their captain wasn't too pleased at my words. Our Primarch wrote the codex for. I stopped him by holding my left palm out. The codex says Space Marines should give in to dark urges and massacre civilians or their allied guardsmen. Does it say the trainer should butcher 1,000 recruits and bathe in their blood, to obtain a new brother? Trying an argument from authority, by referring to your Primarch? I had my own argument right here. Well, that is the curse, Captain Aphale said in a weaker voice. Very well. Here is my curse, Blood Angel. For every one of my sons that you murder during training, I will incinerate one of your recruiting worlds. That how I see their worth, compared to your corrupted flesh and souls. I proclaimed calmly and walked away, heading back to the Fabricator General. I expected they would listen to my warning. I did have a reputation now, for liberally using Exterminatus and Vortex warheads on my enemies. Not that I would murder civilians without some huge reason, but I could be a spiny thorn. Our next Mechanicus project involved establishing a secure network among the friendlier Forge worlds in the sector, via instantaneous mind transmission. It would be a very long process, and I might need to cheat a little and arrange a meeting with Trizin the Infinite, the somewhat sane, or perhaps too mad Necron Lord from Solemnis. The sounding board still proved nearly impenetrable to scans and attempts at reverse engineering. Damn Necrons have forgotten more advanced tech than all the galaxy had discovered in the past 60 million years. The Necrons from Mandragora still held out strong, despite billions of Tyranids organisms and bioships invading them over the past decade. Sure, their world were arid deserts without any biomass, which worked in the Necron favor, but at least humanity got some respite. The Eldar were still bravely fighting the large Tyranid tendril that intersected with their craft world, so two advanced enemies were checkmated right now. The Tau and the Orcs were constantly advancing, as expected, but by now every sector fleet had a few hundred corvettes for patrol and intercept, and still big enough fleets to engage large invasions. With the large fleet at my disposal, my clan had also begun scouting and preparing the next expansion phase, and already chasing away or capturing a few pirate ships operating too close to our borders. Soon enough, our rings of orbital forts would be completed, and we could start sending more colonists, tech priests and mechanized PDF regiments to new feral worlds. And once the huge mass conveyor arrived, I would begin transforming the dozen-kilometer bulk transport into a floating naval base, for 1,000 Fury_interceptors and also ship repair facilities and supply depots, garrison and armor transport and even a huge defense platform to anchor at in safety. There was enough volume inside the huge spaceship to fit 100 litanies with room to spare. Of course, for all that, my Mechanicus priestly friends were my only hope. I unloaded 24 more templates with various utility, from agriculture and mining machines to trains and crate lorries. I wouldn't credit myself for inventing the cargo container, but 40k seemed to have forgotten this useful artifact. Sure, the container was larger and better armored, but the fabricator general soon understood its usefulness. Standardized containers were a perfect fit for the order-obsessed cult Mechanicus. I also expected the Imperial Guard would soon adopt them as campaign shelters for their guardsmen, beside the logical use as weapons and ammunition transport and storage. I named them standard transport containers, to frustrate all the farseers and precogs searching for any notion of an STC among nebulous futures. It was also hilarious, just waiting to see who will get the heretical abbreviation the soonest. My Rose just snorted and shook her head in exasperation. Stop doing foolish things like that, dear Peth. One day there will be an invisible assassin waiting behind your door. I glanced at the marked corner and drew my weapon. Nothing sprang out, this time. Then I decided to shoot anyway. After another year at Antax waiting for more upgrades and a squad of Night's war machines getting prepared for my future night house, Captain Varian arrived as well with the rest of his fleet, only this time he had acquired a new Endurance_Light_ cruiser, sent by the Triplex Falforge World as a gift, and 5 more brand new destroyers. Varian had named it Hymnal for the Vanquished, which fit well enough that I agreed to it, and his new command. The Endurance was armed with lance batteries by design, and had torpedo tubes as well. Captain Peth, I want to begin exploring to the north of our holdings, as I compiled rumors and hints of another pirate hideout. With my escorts, we will have more than enough firepower to complete this task, my brother declared confidently. I almost denied it, before thinking again. Of course, brother. I have 4 women to add to your crew as medics and soul healers, former Hospitalia sisters. I'm sure Ontax will provision this task force with new tech priests and another regiment for ground operations, and you will have a chance to prove yourself. My daughter Teresa will join you to learn how to command a ship herself, as your XO and second in command. I will also ask Captain Afail to spare a couple Astartes for bodyguard duty. Varian blinked in surprise, as he possibly didn't expect so many gifts. So I can take all the ships I came with? He asked out loud, while looking at my own bodyguard with apprehension. What? No way I would give him 300 ships to start his own empire in the fringe. It was also a little too much for a single pirate group. No, of course not. You will take the upgraded 30 Volcano pattern corvettes, and the 3 King Cobra destroyers from Istobon, then some transport ships to carry the prizes you may find. Plus the Hymnal, after it receives missile launchers and multi-lasers for point defense. I explained with a wide grin. It was still a force to be reckoned, and would not depend too much on consumable ammunition. And with a few Astartes on board, Varian would not dare to mutiny. He knew that just as well. It's still great, Captain Peth. Are those sisters as beautiful as I heard? He asked without any ulterior motive, though his manner wasn't quite reverent. I just patted his shoulder, with a wide grin on my face. Oh yes. I already turned 2 of them into concubines. You may pick a few as well, if they catch your eye. He returned a lecherous smile and walked away trippingly. Poor foolish brother. Well, some women like his type too, I suppose. Brave noble captain, eager for glory. Of course, beside Helena, only Catherine seemed interested to make babies with me, so the rest of the apostate sisters didn't concern me. Varian could try his luck too. My wife Decima was now conducting final interviews and tests to assure herself that Catherine, the new concubine, was loyal and able to bear children for the clan. Meanwhile, down on the surface, the biologist Magi were doing other experiments with my half-brothers from Justine, testing them for night pilot compatibility as well as harvesting more fertile eggs from my blank concubines. They were determined to replicate the blank machine spirits from Istobon, despite the huge risks involved. A dozen fetuses yet unborn have somehow vanished, but I pretended not to notice. Sacrifice was the name of the game in this hell. Having a few working samples of the new blank designs would speed up research 100 times, not to mention harvesting samples from the primary source, me. I kept working on the Predator version of the Rhino, armed with a Volcano Lance and 2 multilasers, 1 coaxial on the turret and 1 installed on the frontal glacis. These would not be troop carriers, but instead dedicated main battle tanks, with reinforced armor, a power shield and a few engineers in the crew for maintenance. Once that was done, I did the same with land-raided tanks and the knights, upgrading their templates for better effectiveness and slightly more durability via iron shields. My Volcano Lance gunship didn't yet work, but instead the Fury space fighter did, being large and durable enough to withstand the recoil and energy demands of such a potent weapon. A backup power shield was added to their already significant iron shields, and I made a note to update all the escorts with a backup iron shield as well, since I recalled it nullified Necron Gauss weaponry. The fabricator met me in his rooms before I left for my next trip, and received the new templates with reverence. "We will conduct immediate testing and calibration litanies for these holy relics, Lord Pef. I have to ask, do you have a real STC database somewhere?" I stared at his red robes and mechanical body while I strained my memory for an answer. The Mechonicus did have a few working STCs on board their Arch Mechonicus battleships, but they didn't know about them. "I have heard a rumor. The Palomar Forge world is whispered to have built an Arch Mechonicus long ago, deep underground, and it should also have a working STC on board. However, I fear that waking up the old machine spirit will destroy the mines and everyone else on that planet." I spoke with doubt in my voice. I couldn't be certain if this was still true, or just wishful writing in another universe. To my surprise, the Fabricator General stepped close and hugged me with a dozen tentacles. "Who cares about Palomar? I will go personally to recover the Holy Arkansas well, once the Lament is fit for travel." I patted his eager limbs and shook my head. Arrange for Palomar to relocate, at least partially. Better have them support the Eye of Terror blockade, and supply humanity with war machines. The Black Crusades will keep coming. The Metal Magus deposited me on my chair and patted my head like I was a baby. Well, in size and age I likely was one, compared to him, not to mention mental ability. Always trying to save people, even if it would only delay the return of Omnissiah. "Let's hope your descendants will share your empathy, Lord Pef. This cursed galaxy needs more men like you." I nodded a bit shyly. "If you say so, Fabricator. Let's see about arming my existing troops with sufficient weaponry to pacify the Fringe." The Magus calmed down and we returned to business. The heavy tanks and the gunships will take decades to begin mass production. Perhaps even more for the new Retribution pattern space fighters. But these weasels will not be difficult at all. My forge will provide 70,000 laser cannon variants and 30,000 logistics support, as well as production facilities for ammunition and fuel. Well, that was one worry wiped away. Mechanized PDF would be very useful. "Orbital defenses and the upgraded conveyor?" I asked in a hopeful tone. "Some extra orbital class weaponry, and a space mine factory for your minefields. I have already begun testing these mines for our own defense, but your Nova Shell mines are not feasible. Perhaps against beasts like the Tyranids or the Hood," he explained patiently, and deftly ignoring the other item. I sighed in defeat. In truth, Nova mines could be captured and turned against us by a savvy technological enemy. "And genetic treatments, life extension for my crew and veterans?" I wondered in a more subdued voice. The Magus turned his screen on and showed me his projections. The cost scaled immensely for every new crew category, as these treatments needed rare organic components and thousands of work hours from his biologist magi. Damn it. Ship captains and regiment colonels, for now. With light power armor and shields for the other field officers. I mused softly, seeing the cost drop abruptly on the screen. Nobody can support such expensive upgrades, unless it's the ecclesiarchy that has donated trillions of thrones and arms, the Adeptus Sororitas. And even so, not all of them have good gear or shields. The Fabricator replied in a wise voice, and sighed. Again, logistics for such upgrades were the main problem. Iron shields for every spaceship or heavy vehicle? I have read somewhere that Necron weapons are ineffective against those types of shields, I said in a wondering voice. My interlocutor froze a second, then stared at me intensely. "It's a worthy conjecture, Lord Pef. I'll have the astropaths send this data to Mars right away. Necron worlds are terrible enemies for mankind, and their predations are nearly unstoppable due to the advanced xenotechnology." I smiled and drank some wine. "Well, don't hope for a perfect counter to the Necrons, esteemed Magus. I'm quite certain these have many more weapons with different technologies, just like the Mechanicus doesn't have only macrocannons. The fabricator snorted in derision. Macrocannons were plebeian weapons, used by the Navy or Orcs. Indeed we do, like I already showed you on the upgraded Lament, Lord Pef. But if we manage to recover that Arch Mechanicus relic, there should be a trove of better holy machines, from the Golden Age maybe. He announced in a fanatical voice and immediately splashed me with sanctified ointment. Damn lack of common sense again. Upgrades to my canticle? I asked with little hope. Minor upgrades now, and 20,000 plasma torpedoes delivered to your base at Retribution, in a decade or so. Jiren decided to convert that world into a new Forge world beholden to us, to supply your holdings forever. So everything else will be done on site, he told me with a right tone. A bit sneaky, and perhaps trying to find real STC templates on Retribution. Then again, I wasn't attached at all to that world, with painful memories from losing my father and many of my clan. He could have it, and good riddance. As soon as the Canticle received my needed upgrades, I convened with the clan members still at Antax. As you know, I have allowed Captain Varian to pursue the exploration expedition to the north. If there are any volunteers among you who wish to try their luck, please do so and request transfer to my brother's fleet. Capturing pirate vessels or discovering STC patterns is very lucrative, but also risky. I began, powering up the holomap and marking vaguely the area that Varian has chosen. There were thousands of stars in that volume, and nobody knew what dangers they may encounter. In my view, that fleet was expendable, if also strong enough to defeat minor opponents, like I have done. It was also a test and an opportunity to enlarge our empire and increase the richness of the clan. There were still older clan members, aunts and uncles with prodigious service, relatives from my own generation now eager to receive a ship to command and blow up stuff. Then the new generation, cadets and young officers that could use the experience and learn more, and thus earn the right for a ship themselves. I had about 40 daughters and sons among them, and a few blank girls approaching their age limit for military service. Still cadets in training, but time passed fast. By the time I would return from my next trip, many of them will be adults, and perhaps married. My Aunt Hester, a stern, red-headed and bulky body woman with remembrancer implants, also a centuries-old veteran, elected to go as captain for a King Cobra destroyer. She got my approval right away, although she spanked me a dozen times in my youth. I probably deserved it. One more uncle, Severus with long blonde hair braided in dreads, and an old sister, Marilyn, with curly black hair and brown eyes, got the same jobs, and then it was time to divide the corvettes and the XO ranks. The cadets could offer themselves for bridge posts or space fighter pilots, though they were banned from direct fighting till adulthood. No matter their bravery, a trained mind and body mattered more when you had to assault a position carrying 50 kilos of gear, armor and weapons. Those with blank genes were ordered to take every possible precaution to survive, because I needed them to produce the next generation. Teresa smirked at me and waved her left hand suggestively. I know, but I was stupid. Don't do as I did, do as I tell you. Unless you have an angel watching over you, in which case I won't have to worry, right? I grumbled in fake annoyance. Lord Pef. Can I request Lord Whitelands to join? Varian demanded with a pleasant voice. I frowned and thought about it. His knight might save them from ambush or another mess. You can. But he is my stepfather of sorts. Ask him politely if he wishes to join you, Varian. I decided after a few seconds. And with that, all as left was picking which regiments to send and what equipment. Nothing too critical, but enough firepower to avoid fleeing from barbarians. 50 Lehman Rust tanks and 500 Chimeras for the armor regiment, then 5,000 weasels for the mechanized infantry, with support from 100,000 combat servitors donated by Antax. After the northern expedition left, I also sent my newly born kids and the rest of the fleet back home, holding back a dozen corvettes and 2 destroyers as escorts for my next forged visit. This time, it would be Riser. This forged world was said to be only second to Mars in advanced technology, specialized in plasma designs and weapons. On the way, I revisited my early attempts at modeling plasma-based STCs and worked out a few more effective templates, such as the Multi-Melter Chimera, a variant expressly designed to combat traitor Astartes or light armor. Then, The real infantry melter gun from Retribution, somewhat simplified for simpler construction and durability. Then I cobbled up some partial Land Raider templates with turret with triple plasma cannons and heavy flamers in the sponsons and forward mount, especially for orc hordes. No passenger compartment, only Promethium fuel tanks. This heavy tank was provided iron shields and a power shield on each side, because it was already a ticking bomb on tracks. The fire corvette had a bombardment cannon turret and 20 las cannons on every side and 100 multi-lasers protecting every angle, beside the usual triple void shields and triple layered armor. The last design was a King Cobra destroyer template with 2 plasma bombardment cannons and 6 triple plasma cannons batteries, each turret with its own dedicated reactor. Such a ship, if it worked, would be death to orcs, tyranids and other short-ranged organic enemies. I named it Fire Cobra, because it would make a huge fireball once it exploded. Not my problem. I didn't bother balancing the plasma conduits and energy output, nor containment and cooling. Ryza had enough experts and time, and I didn't. My half-stalled projects for Volcano Lance gunships and Sentinel walkers were added on the data stack, and I left out a tired breath. There was only so much a single person could, and upgrading the entire Imperium from the outside was horribly difficult. If they caught on to it, there will be hell to pay. Technology was a religion for the Mechanicus, and there have been Forge World exterminated for breaking the rules. Advanced knowledge was reserved only for high-ranking tech priests, and nobody even dreamed of falsifying STC templates. No wonder the Antax fabricator suspected I had found our STC database on Retribution. A pair of strong hands massaged my tense shoulders. Catherine, the new concubine. Lord Pef, isn't this staring at the cogitator screen boring? Come, I was promised many babies. The silver-haired woman demanded in an attempt at a sultry voice. Well then. Relaxation was prescribed by the personal doctor. I winked at Ludvius and entered my shower, Catherine following me eagerly. We might have wasted some seed with foreplay and gratuitous pleasure, but it was really relaxing. Soon enough we moved to my captain bed to proceed with our duties. For once I didn't mind her chants, it was music to my ears. Oh God, oh Emperor. Faster, yes. She could perform marital duties without being short of breath, which always amazed me. Then the ship shook, but it wasn't our bed. I closed my eyes and focused, to hear and to feel the machine spirit. Another shake and then the familiar thrums of our lance batteries began, vibrations reverberating through the Canticle's hull. Never mind then. Combat was certain. Uniform, I demanded in a rush. I had urgent duties on the bridge, but Kathy seemed lost to the world and frantically trying to obtain release. Then the torpedoes launched, all of them, and I was freed from the trap, jumping from the bed straight into my jumpsuit. Then Ludvius rapidly assembled my power armor over the skin-tight protective suit. In a minute I arrived on the bridge to find ourselves right behind an orc fleet, heading towards Ryza just like us. No matter how strong a ship is, even an orc cruiser, this kind of engagement favored us greatly, and Wenchen didn't miss the opportunity. Lances and torpedoes, fighters getting launched, las cannons and macro cannons, missiles and multi-lasers filled the void between us and the enemy squadron. One after another, the bigger orc ships were targeted with torpedoes, blowing up their engines, while the orc escorts simply burst into plasma and scrap from our lances and cannons. I just watched, as nearly anyone could conduct such a massacre, and Wenchen was quite capable anyway. With this fortunate warp emergence, Ryza would owe me a favor from the start. Closer to the sun, their defense fleet was engaged by a second orc armada, and those were already landing horde after horde onto the surface, disregarding losses in the millions. I suddenly regretted not bringing some extra escorts. This was a fantastic shooting gallery. We could barely miss in such a rich target environment.